Oh, great.
And I assume, yeah, you said you're in Innovation Depot, so I guess my office, I'm 2 blocks away from you then in Innovation Depot. I didn't realize that the SBA had an office in that building.
Well, SBDC.
SBDC. Oh, okay, okay. Oh, okay, okay.
The SBA office is about 2 blocks away as well. They're over at on the backside of the Greyhound station, if I remember correctly.
Okay, I thought for some reason I thought those guys were up Lakeshore somewhere, but my brain gets awfully scattered at times. So I'm sorry I don't look like a banker. I didn't realize I was going to be on a webinar this morning when I left the house. So
it's perfect. Thanks to everyone who has joined the webinar thus far. We are going to kick it off here in about 2 minutes, just giving everyone a chance to log on. Alrighty, I think we can kick it off. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us for the Emergency Response Program in Alabama. We have some great speakers for you today, so we're very excited to share as much information as possible. So this is the step-by-step process on applying for SBA eligible programs. We also want to give a huge thank you to our partners at Bronze Valley in Birmingham. They have been absolutely paramount in casting a wide net across Alabama to make sure that we're involving as many people as possible in this. So again, just a big thank you to them. If you are on a phone or a call-in option is preferred, you can call into this webinar at 1-646-558-8656. And the webinar ID is 874-794-007. We really encourage questions during today's webinar. There's going to be a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. Please type in questions throughout the meeting and send them to the hosts. Any unanswered questions will be sent to the speaker to answer after the webinar. Don't send your questions anonymously, just so we can make sure to get back to you. And then any emails to me at prentice@generator.com are always welcomed. So again, please submit those questions and we'll ask them to the panelists at the end of the webinar. We'll leave about 20 minutes for that, so we can answer a lot. And due to the number of people on the webinar, we won't be able to address technology issues right away. However, we will record the webinar and share it with all registered emergency response program participants. And then I want to give a huge welcome to our speakers. We have Michael Brooks, who's the Associate Director of the SBDC in Tuscaloosa. And we have Jason Eppenger, who is the Alabama Market President of Citizens Bank and Trust in Birmingham. So they are fabulous and are going to be able to provide you with all kinds of great insights. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to turn it over to Michael, who will get us kicked off.
Well, thank you all so much, and thank you all for the invitation to talk to you all today about the disaster loan programs. And we'll step through what each of these are, sort of the short history that we've had with them, and talk about the application process, and then give you up-to-date information on where we're at on each of the programs. So 30-second background of the Alabama SBDC Network, Small Business Development Center Network. We've been around for about 40 years helping Alabama's entrepreneurs and small business owners based at the University of Alabama. But we do have partner relationships with four-year institutions throughout the state. And if y'all are dialing in from somewhere other than Alabama, I definitely encourage you to reach out to your local SBDC program. A great group of folks that have learned a lot about these disaster loans in the last 3 weeks. Normally, we're in the business of helping businesses, helping individuals start, scale, grow their business. And we measure results based on job creation, business starts, government contracting, and acquiring capital for expansion purposes. We look forward to getting back to that. But for now, in the last 3 weeks, we've really been focused on helping companies engage these different disaster programs. So a quick disclaimer that they make me say here is that the SBDC program, it's partially funded by SBA. And while we have some initials in common, the SBDC program is not the SBA. So we are unable to provide updates on your application status or influence any application that you have pending. We can't answer many questions about the programs that are out there based on what we know at this point. And let's see, any opinions, conclusions, recommendations are those of the author, of myself, and not necessarily those of SBA, the University of Alabama. We like to start with a quick reminder that unfortunately, even though we're in a time of crisis and disaster, there are people out there that they know that and they are trying to take advantage. So we remind folks to apply an extra level of due diligence to any emails or calls that you receive. Understand who you're talking to, understand who you're corresponding with, verify that they are who they say they are before you start giving out information. Because there are scammers out there. And if you're not following your local Better Business Bureau on social media, we encourage that because they've been doing a great job at getting the word out about some of these issues. So the information that I'm presenting, it's actually correct as of yesterday at 5 o'clock. We started all of our presentations over the last 3 weeks with a disclaimer that this information is current as of a certain date. And then we started adding an hour and minute timestamp as well, because portions of this program seem to evolve every 3 to 6 hours. And it was both a moving target for small businesses who were attempting to apply for this program, and also for all the intermediaries and resource partners like SBDCs, accelerators, et cetera, that are trying to provide some training and information on these programs. So information as of yesterday. I don't think there were any major changes overnight. We're going to cover 2 major programs, the Paycheck Protection Program that was launched as part of the CARES Act, and then SBA's disaster loan program. Starting with the PPP, this was part of the CARES Act, and these were created specifically to help cover payroll. And it's designed for, we'll get into the calculation in a second. Portions of these loans are intended to be forgivable if you maintain the appropriate level of employment and salary for folks. We throw that out there because the initial rollout of this program, we kind of jokingly said it sounded like something Oprah would do, or my generation, like Ed McMahon would show up at your house with a 3-foot wide check, $10 million forgivable loan. And the reality and expectation are 2 different things. Portions of the loan are forgivable if you comply with the requirements of the program. Set that out. Applications are due by the end of June. We understand there's a really good chance that the dollars allotted to this program will be exceeded. I don't have an up-to-date count on where they're at right now, but we do know that Congress is working on adding additional dollars to both this program and possibly the disaster loan program. PPP program is the one that is deployed through the banking community. So you're going to be applying with your lender to access this program. Talk more about who to talk to and who's offering this program. Basic background here, they have some expanded eligibility. So instead of your standard requirements for SBA size, they've bumped all of those up. So you have to have no more than 500 employees, or the maximum number specified by SBA in your size standard, whichever is larger. And a unique carve-out specifically for our friends in the accommodation and food service sector, that's designed to accommodate many of the larger retail chains. You can have many locations as long as no single location exceeds 500. A certain list of franchises are approved, and then if you've received an investment from a SBIC, Small Business Investment Corporation, the idea there is that many small businesses, many entities, before they receive an injection from an SBIC are small. After that injection, they're no longer considered small. SBA wanted to make sure that those folks are included in this program. And just as a quick example, for example, if you are a new car dealer, the traditional size standard says you have to have 200 or fewer employees. And with this program, it now allows you to have up to 500. And you'll see variations on there. If you're a greeting card publisher, if you have 1,000 employees, you still qualify because under the size standard, the greater number is 1,500. We have questions. We've had questions over the last few weeks about size standards. They've tried to cast a very wide net for this program. PPP does include sole proprietors, independent contractors, and self-employed folks. And two very specific nonprofit organizations are included in the PPP, 501c3s and 501c19s. So nonprofits, and then qualified veterans organizations, and then certain tribal entities as well. And I say that because this is going to be different criteria than what we see for nonprofits in the disaster loan. So as a quick reference, 501c3s, very short list there, and then the 501c19s, armed forces organizations. So we started, the lenders started accepting applications for this a week ago, and we like to call out that the interest rate is fixed at 1%. There was a lot of confusion in the marketplace because when Treasury first announced it, when Congress announced it, they announced it would be at 4%, and then Treasury came out with guidance that it would be at 0.5%, and then finally when SBA and Treasury got together, they agreed on 1%. So the challenge a lot of companies have had is they've got these great explainers from their elected official, from their congressperson, possibly from their lender, from a chamber of commerce, from other entities that are trying to help. And they might be circulating information that was accurate at the time that was put together, but it evolved so quickly over the last 2 weeks that many of those explainers, many of those guides are now outdated. We always recommend folks to check online to make sure they've got the most recent details. A lot of the confusion in the marketplace is simply because they're working on information that was relevant a week or two ago and has since been updated. Payments on these are deferred for 6 months, so interest does accrue, and the balance of the loan, any part that's not forgiven, is due in 2 years. There's no prepayment penalty, so if you don't use the funds, or if you're ready to move on and get this off the books, there's no penalty for prepaying. No collateral is required, and there is no personal guarantee. Not an exception, but a note here is that part of the CARES Act, they did set aside a substantial amount of money for the Inspector General's office to pursue folks that are attempting to access these funds, these programs, fraudulently. One of the questions we've had, one or two folks have asked, I don't really need this loan because my industry has not been terribly impacted. We're actually benefiting from this type of situation, and we still apply for it. And we'll see that in a minute, but the answer is no, because you have to be able to show a need and show that your business was impacted. And so we don't give legal advice, but it seems to be that if you're in good shape and you try to access this, you'd be going against the intent of Congress, and you have to sign you have to sign a acknowledgement that your application is in compliance with what they intended. And for this program, SBA has waived the credit elsewhere requirement. Under normal SBA and other disaster programs, you have to be able to show that you went to another lender and got turned down first through traditional financing. That's not the case here. So the calculation, how much can you apply for? How much are you eligible for under the PPP program? And it's set by a formula. It's 2.5 times your average monthly payroll during the year preceding the disaster. There was some confusion. Treasury said January to December 2019, calendar year 19. CARES Act said the last 12 months. And basically, it's going to come down to talking with your lender to determine how they've interpreted it, because it's going to be the lender that you are applying with, and then it's going to be the lender that has to determine whether or not at the end of this 8-week period, you've complied with rules and regulations to get that portion of your loan forgiven. The original intent with PPP program was that people would have gone to the disaster process and they would have a certain amount of disaster loan funds available. And then when they got the PPP program, they'd be able to refinance and roll that in. And the opposite seems to have happened. Folks started receiving PPP funding before any of the disaster loan monies have rolled out. We'll talk about disaster loan in just a minute. So other questions we get, what if I wasn't in operation in 2019? I just started in January. You can take your January and February payroll and get an average there. And then a question around employees, because folks like the IRS and the Government Accountability Office, GAO, calculate a full-time employee at 40 hours per week. For purposes of the SBA program, they consider a full-time equivalent as 30 hours per week. So if you have somebody that works 60 hours a week, they're 1 FTE. You've got 2 part-time folks, each at 15 hours, that's 1 FTE. And that goes into the calculation. You need to be able to show how many folks were employed pre-disaster, and then you're going to use that to confirm that you employed that number of folks 8 weeks on. And then there's a different calculation that's available for folks that have seasonal workers, folks at the coast, or they're in industries that have seasons to them. There are different calculations allowed, and it's up to the borrower to decide which one works out best for them, so you can plug in the numbers either way. So one of the big questions is exactly what is a payroll cost? That's salaries, wages, commissions, and tips, capped at $100,000 on an annualized basis. If you had somebody that started at $90,000 and makes $110,000, you're looking at an average over the previous 12 months to figure out compensation level. Payroll costs include benefits like vacation, parental, medical leave, sick leave, and healthcare and retirement benefits. So in calculating payroll, you are capped at $100,000 on the salary portion. So if you have an employee that makes $120,000, when it comes to forgiveness, you can only claim up to that first $100,000. If you have an employee that's compensated at $90,000 and then they have additional benefits that take them up to $110,000, you're allowed to count those additional benefits up to that $100,000 mark. Payroll costs also include your state and local taxes on compensation. It does not include independent contractors. And that was a huge point of confusion for a lot of folks. We still have 1 or 2 lenders in the state that they're trying to be helpful. They put an Excel sheet on their website that says, hey, this is how you can calculate what you might be eligible for under PPP. It includes a line for independent contractors. Now, their thought process is we want the applicants, we want the small businesses to list that separately so they understand what is payroll and what is independent contractor. But in the process, it just adds to the confusion as to is that number included or not. So we've seen some folks revise their Excel sheets to include independent contractors as a separate line below and separate from the payroll cost calculation. And that has also helped the lenders so that both the applicant and the lender understand there are 1099s and they're down here, but they're not included as part of our payroll calculation. The use of the proceeds. So this is primarily intended for payroll, and that's why it's calculated at 2.5 times your average monthly payroll. There are additional things that you can use the loan for. Interest on your mortgage obligations, not the mortgage payment itself, but the interest on mortgage obligations. As long as the mortgage existed, you entered into it before February 15th. Same thing with lease agreements entered into before February 15th, and any utilities that you began service on before February 15th. The intent of the program, what Congress wants folks to do, is basically cover payroll for an 8-week period, for 2 months, if you And when it comes to forgiveness, 8 weeks from now, when you go back to your lender, you need to be able to show documentation that the loan proceeds were used at least 75% on payroll and 25% on mortgage interest, rent, utilities. And utilities also includes, that's your power, gas, water, phone, internet. Some of the things in the application process, you do have to acknowledge that the information you're provided is supported by your tax documents. We have a lot of small businesses that will have one set of books, let's say, based on what they turn into IRS, and perhaps another set of books that more accurately reflects the financial standing of the company. And this program is based on what you told the government. If you've managed your business to minimize tax, it's going to impact the way that it is viewed. That said, you want to make sure that any numbers that you submit for this program are reflected in your tax return. And then, as I mentioned earlier, you have to acknowledge that the loan is necessary in light of this disaster. So the forgivable amount, 8 weeks from now, what will be forgiven? If your employee and your compensation levels are the same, and as long as you can show the documentation that you've covered payroll, mortgage, interest, rent, utilities, that portion is forgivable. Anything that you use the proceeds for that is not in this list of forgivable items is converted, or basically is the balance that remains on the loan. And it's a 1% loan at 2 years, so you usually can't get money a whole lot cheaper than that. And I know a lot of folks right now, the last thing that they want to do is incur additional debt in times of low sales or zero sales. But at 1% over a 2-year period, we've talked to a lot of our small businesses, and they think that this is something that they had to, or if there is an expense that comes up that it might be better for them to use this money on for a 2-year standpoint, it makes sense for them to do that. The amount that is forgiven can be reduced if you are unable to bring back in the same number of FTEs, or anyone that has a salary under $100,000 has been decreased by more than 25%. That will also result in a commensurate reduction in the forgivable amount. So if you've laid folks off or they've left because you have no business right now, as long as you bring them back on by June 30th, you can count their payroll. They count towards headcount, obviously, and payroll. And for purposes of this program, employees are fungible, if you will. If you had John working for you and John left the company and you hire Sally and now Sally is working, for SBA purposes, they don't matter. It does not matter who is in that position as long as there is a person being paid in that position, and you're able to make your post-disaster numbers, your 8-week later numbers, equivalent to your pre-disaster numbers. And then finally, this is a bit of an anachronism here, but the amount of forgivable loan under PPP was designed to be reduced by the up to $10,000 advance from the disaster program. Since the majority of these up to $10,000 advances are just now starting to happen, we're waiting on additional guidance to see how forgivable amount is going to be reduced, since these are coming after the PPP loan has been issued. We covered that. So requesting forgiveness, this is going to vary by lender, and it's important that borrowers understand this when they initiate the loan. It's important that they have a good conversation with the lender so everybody's on the same page in terms of what the expectations are for forgiveness. Essentially what you're going to be doing is submitting a request back to the lender and providing documentation that you complied with terms and conditions of the program, of the loan, and then the lender has 60 days to evaluate your documentation and decide the amount of forgiveness. Now, as you can imagine, the last 2 weeks, our friends in the banking community, and I'm sure we can ask Jason about this in a minute, but have been overwhelmed with the number of applications. And that means that you can start your watch right now. 7.5 weeks from now, they're going to be overwhelmed again with even more documentation as folks are applying for forgiveness on this program. So that's why there's a nice wide 60-day window that allows lenders to accept, process, and reconcile the amount of forgiveness. And if additional documentation is necessary, if there's questions, it provides that window of opportunity. In general, what we've heard from a documentation standpoint, many lenders are asking for your IRS quarterly 940s, 41s, or 44, your payroll tax reports, or any kind of 12-month payroll report that is going to show a breakdown of wages, time off, vacation, medical, taxes, etc. For independent contractors that apply to this program, we're looking back at the 1099s that you received in 2019. That's going to be used for the basis of what you're eligible for in this program. Other documentation on a health insurance premium, the part that's paid by company owners, and you include the owners in that calculation. And then any documentation on retirement plan funding that was paid by the owners, not the part that's funded by employees, but the owner contribution. Also include your owners and employees in that, and then simple IRAs, SEP, or 401k plans. So stepping through the PPP application itself, first thing to do is verify that you've got the current form. Don't see it on the screen, but if you scroll down on the PDF, you want to look in the bottom left-hand corner of the form, and it's going to say 04/2020, April of 2020. And we say that because there is a form that precedes this one that Treasury had out. They did a big push on a Tuesday evening. It's very similar, but there are differences, and you don't want to waste your time filling out a government form only to have your lender tell you that's not the right form. And side note, many lenders are going to have their own application form. They might have an online portal where you can apply, or they will accept this and enter this. So you want your business legal name and your DBA, your trade name. So this could be Smith Investments LLC, and your trade name could be John Smith Plumbing. Make sure you list your business address. Again, the applicant here is the business. Make sure you put down it says business phone. Make sure it's a phone and an email address that you are monitoring. We have had some companies that we work with put down the business phone, and the business closed a week ago, and everything's going to voicemail, and somebody's checking the voicemail every 4 days. That doesn't help when you're trying to get a fast turnaround time from your lender. Make sure you've got current contact information in there. And then very simple, you enter in your average monthly payroll times 2.5. And again, disaster loan advanced, generally it's not going to apply to most folks at this point. And then they've got a space for your number of employees, FTEs. And then down here, you're going to select what are you going to use the proceeds for. Unless you know for absolute certainty that you're going to only use the proceeds for one or two of these items, we've been recommending folks to check all of the boxes, even check the other, and in the explain part, put other legal uses of the proceeds, some broad generic term, so that in anticipation of Congress modifying this program to allow additional expenses to be counted, we don't want you to be hamstrung by only checking one or two boxes. There's no penalty for checking all the boxes, and at the end of 8 weeks, you've only used it for payroll, that's fine. But we want to add as much flexibility as we can and not get tripped up by silly check boxes, right? And then down here at the bottom, you're going to list all of your owners with 20% or more equity, and you may need to attach additional sheets. And then comes the ownership questions. And this has changed from the initial process that they had. The two main questions here at the top, number 1 and 2, if you're suspended, debarred, you can't do business with the federal government or agency, or if you have obtained any other type of SBA loan that's delinquent or defaulted in the last 7 years and caused loss to the government, they're not going to let you to participate in this program. The other questions that we'll ask, basically making sure that there's, if you do own any other businesses, they want to ensure that you're not double dipping or commingling funds here. So it's just check boxes. And if you've already received a disaster loan, please check that box so they can ensure that there's no overlap there. And then the second set of questions, if any owners are subject to any indictments, criminal charges, etc., you'll get kicked out if you say yes. And in the last 5 years, any felonies, they'll bump you out. This is basically the character test, if you will. In the initial guidance from Treasury, there was a line that said that you had to certify that all of the owners are US citizens. And that posed a significant problem. If you've got a corporation that's owned by 5 individuals, and 4 of them are US citizens, and the 5th one is a 20% owner that's a foreign investor, that application would have been thrown out. And they since, in this revised form, only ask you to confirm that the place of residence of the employees used in the payroll calculation their primary residence is the United States. So that's sort of their way, just making sure in the payroll calculation, you're only counting folks whose primary residence is in the United States. And then a quick note on certifications this is the fine print, making sure that you comply with the rules and regulations. And then a bunch of check boxes as well. Again, this is that current economic uncertainty makes this loan request necessary. Just you certifying that you're eligible for this program and that you understand the terms and conditions here. So right now we are, that's the summary of the PPP program. If you don't mind, you want to just go through this disaster loan program and then we can catch all of the questions for both programs at the end. That works. With the disaster loan program, you apply online for this at SBA. So with PPP, you're going to your lender. With SBA disaster program, you're going directly to SBA, and the funds are issued by the Treasury. We are in version 3 of the SBA disaster loan application. When this first rolled out, the president did his evening address from the Oval Office and said they're putting X billion dollars into SBA and these disaster loans are going to be available. Go to SBA and apply. And I think most of the folks at SBA found out at the same time that you and I did, which was the night of that address. The SBA system is primarily designed for geographically specific disasters. So if there is a tornado or a hurricane or an oil spill or a drought or fire, something that impacts a geographically concise area, the application process was really designed around that type of disaster. And never before was it really envisioned as being used as a national program where literally every small business had a potential to apply for the program. Understandably, the application process was not exactly geared toward this type of disaster, and under the weight of the applications, it crashed. That was version 1. Version 2, they moved into a fill out this SBA form, upload it to this box on the SBA website, and we'll process it. That basically lasted for about 3.5, 4 days. And then on Sunday evening, March 29th, they launched the current version. This is actually the back end. What you don't see, it's managed by a private company that does a high volume of online mortgages. They have the technical capacity to be able to handle this. The questions that we get, what if I applied on version 1 or version 2? And SBA's official guidance is go apply in version 3. One of the main differences on version 3 is you now have the opportunity to check a box to say that you're applying for this up to $10,000 advance, which did not exist in the previous version. So again, if you've applied before, our recommendation is to go ahead and apply again. It's a much more streamlined process. So I'll quickly step through the information on disaster loans here and leave time for Q&A at the end. This is open to a slightly wider audience, including ag co-ops, aquaculture, and most private nonprofits, and then anybody that was directly or indirectly impacted. Pretty much any kind of small business can apply, and we just want to make sure that you use your physical address when you're applying. Again, this is normally geared towards a physical disaster, so if you're impacted by a tornado, you want to make sure that you have a physical location in the county that's been impacted. At this point, it's less an issue. You just want to make sure you're using a physical address. When SBA initially rolled this out, their guidance was that we were going to have flexibility when it comes to the credit history. I understand that there is, but due to the volume, a lot of the initial applications, if your credit score was below 600, it was instantly getting kicked out, and people were getting an email back letting them know that. I think you do have, I know you do have an opportunity to reapply. There are businesses that have, they can explain there was a identity theft issue, or there was a medical bankruptcy. There's some other external thing that impacted the credit score, and they can reevaluate that. SBA has to determine that the applicant business has the ability to repay the loan. The expression here is they're not going to throw good money after bad. If the business was already in financially unstable ground, SBA might not consider it. Right now, things are just now loosening up on this disaster loan. We'll talk about the calculations here in just a second. And they also removed the secure credit elsewhere requirement. On the disaster loan, you qualify for up to $2 million. For regular for-profit businesses, it's at 3.75%. If you're a nonprofit, it's 2.75% up to 30 years. And then you can use these proceeds for fixed debts, payroll, accounts payable, other bills that you would normally have been able to pay had the disaster not happened. It's not intended to make the business whole. It's not intended to replace your lost sales or your profits. It's a disaster loan. The idea here is to keep enough cash flowing into the company to literally keep the lights on and make it a viable business so that it can emerge from this. Whereas if it was not available, the business would face a greater chance of not making it. Application deadlines for this are all the way through December 21. Under the revised disaster loan, anything below $200,000, you do not have to have a personal guarantee. Anything above $200,000, there is a personal guarantee that's required. Technically, no collateral is required, but SBA is going to make every attempt. If there is collateral, they would like to include it. And they do not have to be the first lien on this. They said they'd take their number 5 or number 15, as long as they can put their name somewhere, that would work for them. So under this new disaster, revised disaster program, part of it is a $10,000 forgivable advance. Initially, they said it'd be available within 3 days of the request. And wow, if there's ever a lesson in over-promising and under-delivering, this is it. As you can imagine, getting $10,000 advances out to thousands of applicants did not happen. We are just now, almost 2 weeks later, starting to see some of these up to $10,000 advances getting out there. SBA did clarify just at the end of last week that not everybody's going to get $10,000. It's based on the number of employees, up to $1,000 per employee, up to 10. And you can apply for both the Paycheck program and the disaster program. You just have to ensure that if you're not using the proceeds for the same expense, they want to ensure that there's no double dipping. Like the last program, there are no prepayment penalties. And again, the intent was to be able to roll disaster loan into PPP. I'm not sure very many people will be able to make those dates work. And then this is an area that we're waiting for additional guidance on. The original idea is if you accept that $10,000 forgivable advance, then you do go to the PPP program, the amount of forgivable expenses would be reduced by $10,000. So you'd still be able to use that money towards payroll, but it goes back to that double dipping. They're trying to roll everything into one. So you apply online, covid19relief.sba.gov. No cost to apply. So be wary of folks out there that are charging you. You can pay someone to assist you with this. You can pay a packager that can help you with this, but it's not required. And honestly, the application is pretty streamlined at this point. And then there's no obligation to take it if offered. And there's no prepayment. So if they do fund it, you can simply pay it back the same day if you decide it's not something that you want to pursue. So the application process. Read this carefully. A lot of errors that we've seen is our folks get to the very first line here and say, yes, I'm an applicant with fewer than 500 employees. They check that and move on. Read through line by line to make sure you are selecting the right one. If you're a sole proprietor, with or without employees, if you're an independent contractor, co-op with more than 500, ESOP, tribal business, etc. And then down here, if you are a nonprofit 501c, D, or E, so different parameters from the PPP program. Read through those. And as a quick explainer, 501cs are nonprofits, Ds are religious organizations, and Es, hospital services, etc. And then there's an eligibility check. Y'all are dialing in from Alabama. Probably not a whole lot of variation here, but you have to confirm that you're not engaged in illegal activities. And for places like Colorado, Illinois, California, where there are legal variations of cannabis or hemp-related businesses, Alabama has very specific carve-outs where you can operate with what is inbound versus what is out of bounds. But these are federal guidelines, so make sure you're adhering to federal guidelines in terms of what's legal and what's not. And the calculation, so you've got the disaster loan advance, the $10,000, it's based on number of employees, and then the actual disaster loan itself is going to be a very simple annual sales minus cost of goods sold divided by 12 times 4. As long as that number does not exceed $300,000, chances are you're going to see a direct deposit in your bank account for that amount. If it exceeds $300,000, that's where SBA is going to have to reach back out to you, request additional information so they can come up with a calculation. So another disconnect here is disaster loan, $2 million program. Reality is it's going to be sales minus cost of goods sold. This calculation, anything above that is going to take a little bit longer for a loan officer process. And this is the application form, legal name, trade name, social security number, or your EIN. And this is where you enter in, again, your gross revenues, your cost of goods sold, entering your business address, contact information, date your business established. Check with your state Secretary of State office and ensure that your business established date reflects what the legal business established entity establishment date is. We've heard of some errors in confirming that when you've got conflicting dates. And then a section on entering business owner information. And you have to click here to add additional owners, anybody that has 20% or more. And then a final checkbox, same as before, criminal offenses, suspended, debarred, etc. And then this is where you request your $10,000 up to $10,000 advance. Keep in mind that whoever coded this has never actually looked at a check before. They ask for your account number first and then your routing number. And most folks are accustomed to reading those in order. We've had plenty of folks that have entered them in flip-flopped. Don't give SBA any reason to delay getting the funds back to you. Make sure you spend a second to get that correct. And two quick final notes. There is an employee retention tax credit if you take advantage of under the Families First Act, where I believe it's up to 50% of your payroll. You can then submit during tax season to get that forgiven. You can't double dip, so you can't use PPP and the tax credit at the same time. And then a last note, SBA relaunched their bridge loan program where you can access up to $25,000. That is based on your business and personal credit score, and that's available through March of 2020. I think I tried to get through that as quickly as possible. Normally when I do this, I'm joined by our capital access team, a bunch of former lenders or recovering or retired lenders, and a great group of folks on the SBDC team. I'm very glad that Jason is online with us today, as he might be able to answer any of the more technical questions. With that said, I think we've left just enough time for some Q&A.
Yes, thank you so much, Michael. We really appreciate that. And then for anyone who has joined us a little late here, just so you know, we have Jason Eppenger on the line. And Jason is with the Citizens Bank and Trust in Birmingham. So please submit any banking questions and take advantage of his expertise. And then we, of course, have Michael Brooks here as well. I'll start reading through the questions, but please keep submitting them. So first one, I own a startup small business founded mid-2019, spent the first 10 months growing the company and paid self with personal money. I entered calendar year 2020 positioned to more than replace my traditional income 3 times over. Now all engagements have been postponed due to COVID-19. With the exception of a few owner draws, I don't have payroll history. Where do I fit into the CARES Act, PPP, or unemployment? Where can I go for help?
You want me to answer?
I'll let you start, sure.
Yeah, okay. So, and again, what I'm giving you is my understanding of the legislation and the rules. So I do have to kind of give that disclaimer. This is just, again, my interpretation of the rules at this point, along with some of the guidance that has been provided. That question is unique and is interesting. My understanding of it is that, again, there has to be some show of payroll costs from 2019 in order to be eligible, if that makes sense. You have you took owner draws in 2019, which would, in my opinion, make you eligible to apply as a self-employed individual. However, I don't think that your additional staff would be eligible in your calculation. If you have put yourself on payroll in 2020, I think that information could be used as a backup. But my understanding would be that, or my advice would be, to file as self-employed, use your LLC, and you can use the net income that would show up on your Schedule C on line 31 as your basis for your income. Michael, if I've said anything that you don't agree with, I'll kick that back to you, but that would be my understanding of your situation.
That sounds right. Yep.
Perfect, thank you. Do we know when the funds for PPP and EIDL will be exhausted?
So as of yesterday, I read that that 2.6 or either 2.8 billion of the funds have already been allocated. This again is just my opinion. My guess is at the rate that that number is moving on a daily basis, that the funds would probably be exhausted no later than the end of next week, if not before the end of this week.
Thank you.
The rate has really increased. I think when it first opened, there were 1,700 institutions doing loans. There are as many as 4,400 doing loans now. And again, as of yesterday, the total had reached 2.6 226 billion, excuse me. And the program itself was allocated for 349 billion. So I would think those funds would be exhausted at no later than probably the end of next week if the rate continues at where it is now. I have no idea with the EIDL. Those are administered directly through the SBA, and just to be frank, I haven't really tracked the progress on that.
There were reports last week about EIDL, the disaster loan, running out of funds, and we've heard from SBA in the last day or so that's not the case. There were reports that the disaster loans were being capped at $15,000 total, and we have direct proof from companies that we work with that that's not the case. Where one of our clients received $200,000 in funding in the disaster loan program, another one over $300,000. So the money is there. There was an email from SBA sometime last week that said that they might need to cap it at 15 based on subscription, based on the demand. That does not seem to be the case right now.
Thank you.
So this was, the number that I gave you was 205. It was 205 billion as of 3 o'clock on Sunday. So we are it's 10 to 1 Central Time now. So we're almost 48 hours from that number for the PPP. But that's the last documented one that I can see in my email box. But I read something yesterday that I think the number was up closer to 260 billion at some point yesterday. So there's about 90 to $100 billion left, roughly.
Thank you both so much. Moving on to the next question. If an individual business receives money from this program for their business, is this considered a loan to pay back to the SBA or a grant?
So this is a loan. The loan has a forgiveness provision where up to 100% of the loan may be forgiven. And I want to emphasize the wording may be forgiven. There are several parameters that must be met that Michael went through in his presentation that would lead up to a 100% forgiveness. I will say that personally at our bank, what we have done is during the application process, we have included in our application packet a forgiveness calculator, in a sense, where what we're trying to do is keep that front of mind with the applicants, that there are certain parameters in particular that no more than 75% of those funds can be, at least 75% of the funds must be used for payroll costs. Again, so that means no more than 25% can be used for the other costs that are legally feasible under this act. And so, and also in our application process, we have asked for some of the items up front, backward looking the first 3 months of this month, just to condition the applicant of the information that we will be asking for in 90 days or so when it comes time to apply for forgiveness. We've asked people to kind of verify what their rental payments are, utilities, and things like that. Again, it is just part of the exercise to condition folks to understand that the items that will be needed on the backside when it comes time to apply for forgiveness, and to also really emphasize the fact that it's not automatic, that there is something, there's a burden on the borrower to apply for the forgiveness through your lender. So there is a second phase of this process that will have to occur.
Perfect, thank you. Next question references a massage therapy business that received only $1,000 in advance from EIDL. Is that because they inaccurately completed the app by including her 1099 massage therapists?
Possibly, if she provided, if she included the 1099s there, I believe the disaster loan is based on FTEs and did not include independent contractors.
Thank you. What if the lender is not participating in the PPP program? Are there lenders who are accepting loan applications from non-customers?
There are. It's going to vary by state, and you're going to have to look around to see which ones are. I think for some smaller lenders, it's an opportunity for them, if they haven't participated in SBA programs before, sort of jump in and hopefully attract some more customers. We know a lot of lenders initially and understandably only opened the program up to their existing customers. You have to imagine this is a high effort program. I guess I could classify it as low yield, high effort, low yield. Jason may defer on that to comment question there, but other places that you could go look for some of the online lenders. And this is not an endorsement, but just as an FYI, places like Bowfly, Lendio, Pal, Intuit, QuickBooks folks, they all have online portals now. They're accepting applications for. We recommend starting with your existing lender and a local lender, because at the end of 8 weeks, if you have to explain anything, it's a whole lot easier when you know that you've got somebody that's in your marketplace that's committed to serving the local community. Uh, no offense against our online lenders, but they're based in who knows where, and it's very easy for them to say, too bad, and walk away, whereas the local bank, your local lender, has skin in the game. They're interested in serving the folks in their own bank.
Thank you, Michael. We're a 501c and have been in existence for over 60 years, but have no documentation about our date of incorporation. I've tried to find it in the Secretary of State website as well as the IRS website and have been unsuccessful. Is there a clearinghouse site to find that information?
That's a great question.
It's a great question. I do not have an answer for that. I'm sorry. So I will say this. There are certain states that that have different requirements when it comes to formation. And I'm throwing air quotes when I say formation. And some states do not require registering with the state Secretary of State. And with that said, then your only verification would be from the IRS, which is generally your SS4, which is the verification of your EIN. If you have an EIN, I think that the IRS should be able to give you some documentation to verify that. But as far as if you're not listed on your state Secretary of State website or through that office, I really don't have a good answer for. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer for you than that.
Thank you. Next question says, I applied for EIDL 2 weeks ago and have not heard back. Is this to be expected or should I apply again?
So if you applied exactly 2 weeks ago, as in 14 days ago, and the application was March 30th or later, then you're in the right system. And unfortunately, the best thing you can do now is wait. They are right now, just now, starting to move on these disaster loans, and they should be in touch. Calling the helpline, asking to check on the status. I know what they're going to say because we've had many of our clients that have done that. And I can almost give you the response, which is, you've received your application, thank you, we'll be in touch. And that's all they can give you.
Thank you. All right, next question said, I just received my advance. It was only $8,000, which confused me, but have had no communication from the SBA about anything else. Should I also get some other communications other than the deposit?
That's a good question, and that's one that we've got differing results on. We have had companies that we've been working with that opened up their bank account and they found a wonderful surprise. The federal government deposited a bunch of money in there. No conversation with SBA whatsoever, no additional documentation. A day or two ago, they had a disaster loan advance that was put in there for $5,000 or so. And then 3 days later, they had a bump of money that was a result of the disaster loan program. We sort of expected that there would be additional conversation, but from what it looks like, they're using that basic calculation, and if it's under $300,000, they're funding it. We're waiting for additional guidance on SBA, and we're waiting to hear back from some of the companies that we're working with on whether or not they received additional communication. If the calculation results in an amount that's over $300,000 for the disaster loan, SBA is required to reach out to them and obtain additional documentation to be able to support
Thank you. All right, we cruised through those. I think that we're good to go. I'm not seeing any other questions come in at this point, but thank you, Jason and Michael, so much for hopping on the call here, and for all participants. If you have any additional questions or anything that we can help with, please sign up for the one-on-one office hours. Those are with a member of the Generator team, and we'll help connect you to any and all resources possible. And I'll continue to include the link in the email each day, but thank you both again. And
hey, Prentice, do you mind if I make one last statement? and it goes back to Michael's presentation. I really want to emphasize a couple of things here, that when, as a business, when you're doing your calculation, that those 1099 employees are not eligible. I would still tell you this component, that they are eligible as an individual to apply. And I want to, and I've run into that a lot. And we understand that the basis of this is to help people. And the crux behind this legislation were to help the American worker. And so if you are a 1099 employee, or if you have 1099 employees, I encourage you as the business owner or you yourself to apply under that designation, that you would either be I think it says self-employed or an independent contractor on that application, and use that 1099 as your basis for your income verification, and apply as an individual so that you can get some of the relief as well. That's very, very, very important to make that fact known, in my opinion. So.
Definitely. Thank you so much for adding that in. Any other closing remarks? All righty. Thank you both so much, and have a great day.
Thank you.
All righty. Bye-bye, everyone.